Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Plant Postdocs fall webinar. Plant Postdocs is a community of plant science postdocs trying to help each other in our next career stage. And we have been doing these academic jobs or job webinars every fall since 2019. So this is our sixth year of doing these webinars, trying to help postdocs understand how the process works in the job applications and then help them with the resources. So Plant Postdocs, as I mentioned, started in 2019, and we have been very grateful to the help of all the leadership team members, including the co-founder Arif Ashraf, Ariana, Jaspreet, Israel, Hana, Asif, and Yuchen. So with this group of people, we try to bring the resources that are important for postdocs, whether they're looking for jobs in academia, industry, or in the government. And also we're trying to set up resources so that all the postdocs can be part of the plant science community. So with that in mind, we have been putting together these different webinars. And the last year, we did a series of webinars trying to cover all the aspects of the academic job application. So we started with the research statement, then the cover letters, and then how to prepare teaching and diversity statements, and then finally, how do you prepare your research and chalk talk for academic jobs. So with that in mind, this year we are expanding into Okay, so along with that, we also have been awarding outstanding plant postdoc awards, the Sahyadri Outstanding Plant Postdoc Awards for exceptional postdocs who are on the job market, who are on the academic job market in the United States. And this year, we are also expanding this into a Sahyadri Future Faculty Academy, where we want to mentor postdocs in preparing their academic applications for the faculty job positions this year. So we'll come up with more information on both the postdoc award as well as the Future Faculty Academy in this week or early next week. And the deadline to apply for this would be September 15th, 2024. And both these groups will have mentors from plant postdocs help them in preparing their application material for the academic job positions. And last year, the four awardees, outstanding postdocs, were awarded the Sahyadri Outstanding Postdoc Awards, and a couple of them have landed faculty positions in United States and Europe. So we're very proud of these four postdocs, and they also gave talks on their research in a virtual symposium that's also on our YouTube channel. So you can check out our YouTube channel to see what the 2023 outstanding postdocs worked on and how they presented their work. And with that, I would like to start today's webinar. So like I said, we wanted to see what the search committees actually look for in application. So with this in mind, we brought in four panelists who have served as search committee chairs in the previous year in their departments for plant biology searches. So these search committee chairs will talk about the process in their university, and after half an hour, we'll open the floor for questions that you might have. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please put it in the chat so that we can take the question and ask the panelists later. You can specify if you specify which panelist you want the question to be asked, or you can just generally put the question in the chat so we can ask to the panelists and they will answer your questions. So with that, I would like to start by briefly introducing the panelists. So the first speaker is Clint Chappell, who is a professor in Purdue University. And then Tomo Kawashima, who is a professor in University of Kentucky. Marisa Otegi is a professor in University of Wisconsin-Madison. And Chelsea Specht is a professor in Cornell University. And Clint will start with talking about the search in Purdue University.
Okay, thanks very much, Sunil. Let me share my screen. I've got a few slides because I have given this talk quite a number of times. Can you see that properly now?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I've given this talk a number of times to various postdoc and grad student associations within Purdue. So I'm just got 3 or 4 slides that I'd just like to walk through, and then Tomo perhaps can talk about how things are different in Wisconsin. So I think it's useful for you all to understand how this search process works from the faculty side. You only get to see it for the most part from your side, and that unfortunately may not be very informed. So it's going to be, I think, very helpful to talk about this. So the whole process of hiring doesn't always, but should start with some sort of strategic planning process within the department. So there's got to be department has short-term and long-term goals, and hopefully is laying out ideas, directions for research and hiring over the coming years. Each year at Purdue, towards the late summer, the dean asks for requests for faculty lines, and so those could take the form of new positions. Those are kind of rare. What most often happens is that you're running a search to fill the position of someone who's retired, or unfortunately, sometimes if someone doesn't get tenure, there's an opportunity to refill that position. And traditionally, at least at Purdue, if anyone fails to get tenure, that position automatically reverts to the department. It's not something that the dean has to okay, really. I mean, formally he does or she does, but with the idea that you don't want people to be tenured because the department fears losing that position. So those positions automatically come back. So hopefully this request gets approved by the dean, and we get to go ahead and strike a search committee. That would be usually 4 to 5 faculty plus an administrative assistant. At Purdue, we typically have not involved grad students and postdocs in those searches. That committee is then charged with preparing the ad. To be honest, there isn't a lot of latitude in that preparation. There's a few sentences that we have to change for a particular position, because a lot of the verbiage is preordained, describing the university and various facilities that are available and that sort of thing. So there's a few sentences about the research direction, and of course, if you've already looked at job ads, you'll realize that some of them are very broad. That's what we typically like to do in our department. We sort of describe it as best scientist position. Some of them are much more specific in terms of filling a need, perhaps related to teaching in a particular department. That search committee, I think it's important for you to know, has to go through training if they haven't had training in the past few years. That has to do with this very important role of serving on a search committee in terms of recognizing implicit bias and this sort of thing, so that we are evaluating all of our candidates fairly. That ad then is approved by what we call at Purdue the Office of Institutional Equity. They have to make sure it's all satisfactory from a legal perspective, and then of course we go ahead and place that ad in a number of places and on social media. So once those applications start coming in, we'll start looking at them. We usually specify that we will request letters of recommendation. If an ad says that letters will be requested by the search committee, please don't send them in advance, because it's just a nuisance for the search committee. Then once we've gotten to the date that we've specified in the ad where applications will be reviewed, we'll start with a triage of unqualified applicants. And by that, I mean, for example, in an ad, you must state what the basic qualifications for a position are. For example, you must have a PhD. You must have at least 2 years of postdoctoral experience or something like that. If people don't have that, those qualifications, they can't be considered. That's a Department of Labor sort of law. However, we can remove those. That's a fairly small number. Then comes the review process itself, and this is where you're going to find, I think, amongst the committee who's going to speak here today, that there's going to be differences between departments. Typically, so some departments will have all applications reviewed by all search committee members. If you have 250 applications, that's a lot of work. And you need to bear that in mind when you're writing your application. It must stand out because there's going to be a lot of applications received. Typically, what we do is we have a distribution process where each faculty member on the committee, sorry, let me say that differently. Each application is reviewed by 2 committee members. If they rank them highly, then those are then distributed to all committee members for review. If they get ranked relatively low, then they're not considered further. And that is what allows us to develop what's called this long short list, where again, we are now all going to review those candidates, and those are probably the candidates for whom we're going to request letters of recommendation. So what are we considering? First, suitability for the position advertised. Now, let me give you all a piece of advice that my postdoctoral advisor, Chris Somerville, gave me many, many years ago now, and that was, don't turn down a job you haven't been offered yet. In other words, if you think you might be qualified, even if it doesn't quite, your area of research doesn't quite match what the people are asking for in the ad, go ahead and apply anyway. And let them decide, because sometimes the search committee will read an application and go, oh, well, this isn't quite what we were thinking, but this person would really fit in well, and so I would encourage you to do that. Just go ahead and apply. So we're going to look at diversity statements, publication records. Of course, that is going to be the most important thing. Record of funding, if you've been able to get that. That's not a requirement, because it's relatively rare that people postdocs have funding, but it's sometimes there, and so we're going to pay attention to that. We want to look at your statement of proposed research, and specifically, one of the things we look for is your research, future research going to be independent of your current mentor? We're going to look at your statement of teaching interests. Please do your homework and don't just write something. If you're applying to the Department of Biochemistry, don't tell me that you want to teach a course in plant anatomy. That's not going to work. So pay attention to where you're applying. Again, letters of recommendation, and then other factors. And I would just sort of summarize that as, are you showing attention to detail? Because if you're not showing attention to detail in your application, you're not going to be showing attention to detail in your teaching or your grant applications, and you're not going to be successful. So this is where you put your best foot forward initially. And I will stop there and turn it over to Tomo. Hope I haven't spoken too long.
Yeah, thanks, Clint. Yeah, Tomo, you can talk about search in Kentucky.
Sure. So pretty much the just regular flow of the search is pretty much the same as what Clint said. I have a couple of differences in our system in Kentucky. So in order for us to identify, or the job description for new faculty line, we actually vote among faculty members in our department. So every summer we have a voting among all faculty and just discuss what we need, what future direction we should have for the department, and we vote for it. And then right now in our college, we don't have the limit number for requests to the dean, but we usually keep us like 2 to 3 faculty lines per year. But usually we get just 1 or 2 at most from the dean to be approved. So after that, we do the exact same thing what Clint said. But after application, what we do is similar to what Clint said in terms of we get many applications. So at least 2 search committee per applicant we review, and then we check the overall quality of applications. Then we go down to, I think, up to 10 shortlisted for Zoom interview, and that's the time we request letters of recommendations. We don't evaluate letters of recommendations at the beginning because it's just too much, and we just get the application form from you guys, and then we review based on that one. And the letter of recommendation is pretty much just a validation of the quality of the applicants. Sometimes we see some kind of a weird sentences. It's a flag, but usually letters of recommendation for us, at least, is just a validation of the quality of applicants that we selected. One thing that is different from Purdue, at least Clint's department, is suitability for position advertised is very, very important in our college. So there are many cases that we thought that this is the best candidate because of the science, but the dean rejected it. It's not just one time, but many cases it happened. Maybe perhaps because of the dean herself, but this happened in our side. So it is very important, at least if you apply to Kentucky College of Agriculture, the suitability for position advertised is very, very critical. And then I completely agree with Clint about homework. So we can see who just applied for, at the random situation. And then some people really studied what we do, what's our focus, and then what type of faculty members are in a department. And then they talk about those kind of possible collaborations. So it is very important. You think it's just that people can do homework and then just show it. But I think that type of attitude really becomes important at the end. And then I'm not going to talk much about, but our case, we don't have chalk talk. But we really care about the suitability within the college or within the department, because we want to be happy with this person, and this person has to be happy with us. So that's the kind of a culture that we have, which is maybe a bit different from the rest of places. I think that's the difference that I have from Kentucky. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Tomo, for nicely describing the differences of how these processes work. Again, I want to remind all the participants, if you have any questions, you can post it on the chat. Now we'll move on to our third panelist, Marisa. She will talk about the search in University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Hi, everyone. And so pretty similar process over here as well. Last year for us, the strategic planning for these positions, we hired 2 people at assistant professor levels, and it was not restricted to only the department. My department is botany, but we operate as a much larger community across departments, and so we have retreats over the summer with the rest of the plant scientists on campus. There were a number of discussions or where we want to be in 10 years from now and what should we doing. And so the ad for these 2 positions was written with that in mind. So in our interview process and meetings, we asked the candidate also to meet with people from other departments, because that was going to be the community that they are going to be working with. Some other differences, we do have a graduate student in our search committee. And what we decided to do is to meet before reading the applications. Everyone got to read every single of the 142 applications. And the reason why we wanted to meet before is that we wanted to decide the criteria for evaluating the applications before seeing the applications. So, just trying to be very unbiased about it. And so we defined some rubrics and how we were going to read them and how to weight the different aspects of it. There is research, there is teaching, there is service, there is this idea of welcoming a new citizen to the university colleague, right? So their interest in increasing supporting diversity, supporting the department and the initiatives of the whole community. So we decided to include and to weight all that before we ask all the members of the committee to read all the applications. And so when I would say, and I agree with everything that has been said about how important it is to personalize your application according to the institution you are applying to, the kind of position you are applying to, be sure to be very intentional and specific on why you would like to be a member of that community. For us, it was also important the letter, right? You introduce yourself in that letter and you give a summary and a flavor of everything that is in your application. Who are you? Why you want to come? What you have done? What you are planning to do? So that letter can give a very strong introduction of what is in your packet. And so what we did is to read all the applications after defining the criteria for evaluation and asking all the members to rank the applications in ways to identify the 20 top applications of the whole pool. And so all the members send those lists to me. I put them all together in an Excel file, and then we met again and we discussed all those 20. Went back home, read all those applications. Now with all the references letters, we don't read the reference letters just as Tomo mentioned in the first round, and met again now with the top 10 of those top 20. And then discuss again. We wanted to have, there were 2 positions, different research areas, complementary with the rest of the campus. And so we decided in that meeting, so that's meeting number 3, we came up with the top 7. And we decided not to have Zoom interviews and directly invite those 7 people to campus. I would say that that's where the main difference is on what we did last year.
Okay, thank you, Marisa. So now we'll move on to our last panelist, Chelsea. She'll talk about the search in Cornell University.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Sunil, for inviting me to do this. I have prepared a couple of slides because I know Sunil wanted to sort of move. I can say a couple of things about differences at Cornell, but then also move to sort of the second part of the search process with the interviews and how we conducted those. I think largely what you're hearing is really consistent across universities. There's going to be some tweaks as far as like how much the dean is coming in and defining positions. But I think what all of my colleagues have been stating is that it is really important to really understand what the university is that you're going to and what their needs are. And when we at Cornell, when we define our our search plan, it actually includes everything from how we're going to write the job ad, like what the job ad is going to be, how aspirational we are with thinking about looking broadly for the best candidates, but also what are there going to be the responsibilities. If it says we're looking for someone to teach this, make sure you're thinking about how you're going to come and present yourself as being able to teach that class. We're really looking for someone who will take on a leadership role in this area. How are you going to present yourself as a leader in that area? So those are insights into what their hopes and dreams are, what the aspiration is for the search committee. And then at Cornell, we also go through the whole process of defining our rubric, as Marissa mentioned, for how we're going to evaluate the candidates. And then also the process of how many we're going to select for Zoom interviews, how we're going to select those Zoom interview candidates, if there's a separate rubric for that. And then bringing in for interview, how many candidates we are hoping to bring in for interviews. Oftentimes that is restricted by how much money the dean is going to be willing to give the search. So we are typically only given 3 spots for interviews. If we want to interview more candidates in person, then the department needs to come up with those funds. So that's sometimes you'll see that, they're bringing in 3, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. A lot of that will depend on the amount of funding that's available through department as well as college level opportunities. So let's see if I want to share screen here. I wanted to, sorry. just need to bring this up too. You guys can just see the slide, right? Not the PowerPoint view.
Yeah, just the slides now. Yeah, now we can see the presentation.
So I know Sunil had asked me to mention the Zoom interviews, in-person interviews, research chalk talks, and how this process is done. Is that correct? Can I go ahead with that?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just say each university will have best practices for Zoom interviews. And in the last search that I was on, we actually ended up Zoom interviewing more candidates because we just had so much intense interest in so many of the candidates that would bring different things to Cornell, and we kind of wanted them all. And so Zoom interviews is a great way to get to meet somebody and have them talking to you about the papers that you're reading. So how do they present all the amazing work that they've been able to present in their research statement, their teaching statements, and their what we call the contributions to any person, any study, which is a sort of specific way to define how you're going to bring your whole self to Cornell and contribute to an environment of inclusivity. And so many of these best practices, if those of you who have been in Zoom interviews are getting exposed to, where you get, if there are scripted questions, those questions come in a little bit ahead of time, so you have some time to at least read through them, but not so much time that you're going to be giving canned answers. And that's really important. We want you to be thinking about how you're going to address particular issues that the search committee cares about. So your ability to answer those questions in a very collegial manner is what's important. You know, that it's clear that you're going to contribute in the way that that are outlined in the job ad and outlined in those questions. And the as everyone has said before me, Tomo and Marissa and that it's that job ad really is kind of an aspiration for that search committee. So keep going back to that and reading that, because they really meant it. People put their time into writing those job ads, and it really is what we're kind of really looking to bring to the community. So that Zoom interview, just from the perspective of what the committee is looking for engagement, eagerness to kind of interact with the other colleagues. We'll often only have 2 other people on the Zoom interview, so you're not swamped with a bunch of people on the search committee, and then you'll be asked particular questions and given a certain amount of time to respond to those questions. It's really important in Zoom interviews that everybody has an equal opportunity, and we've got to homogenize this across different internet speeds and different abilities to communicate across electronic space. And so we try to do that with very critical best practices in Zoom interviews. And I do have documents that are that define very clearly Cornell's best practices, and most universities do have those. And so that is something you can look at in your institutions as to what their best practices are, or you can reach out and I'm happy to share those as to what Cornell and other universities might be looking for. In the in-person interviews, you'll get your schedule ahead of time, know your schedule, see who you're meeting with. If they reach out to you and say, hey, is there anybody you want to meet with? Respond to that and say, yeah, I'd really like to meet with these people, and have reasons why you'd want to meet with those individuals. And then in those meetings, know their work and think about how your work would integrate with them, with their students, with their postdocs, how you become an integral part of that community. It's an opportunity to demonstrate collegiality, not just with other faculty members, but also with the students, with the postdoc and the staff. We do have our staff respond to a survey about all the interview candidates for the in-person interviews. And there have been cases where if the staff are really not happy with the way that they were treated or the way that certain situations were handled, it has a big impact on the decision that we're making. It's very important that we feel that there has been a broad sense of collegiality, and that this is a person that you're excited to have in your community, and they're going to build that inclusive environment. And then also think about the resources that are available. If you really need greenhouse space and you want to see the greenhouses, need to see the growth chambers, be excited about a natural area that you might use in teaching your class. Think about the resources that are endemic to that institution. The resources that an institution has is an indication of their values. So showing appreciation for those resources is going to go a long way to demonstrating that you're the right candidate for that institution. I know you've had things on research talks and there's other webinars on that. So what we're looking for as a search committee is knowing that a candidate understands their system really well and they're really comfortable in portraying their work as part of both larger collaborations and impactful solutions, whether those are academic solutions or applied, basic. It's how are they changing their field, and that they're comfortable in showing their work within that broader context, not just in a narrow in a narrowly defined perspective. You want your research talk to demonstrate your teaching ability and also that you are building your leadership in the field. And then chalk talks are going to be different institution by institution. In the cases where I've been involved in chalk talks, both at UC Berkeley before I came to Cornell and then at Cornell, it's really about your vision. What are you seeing yourself doing? How do you see your lab? What will it look like? What are you thinking about? Do you like students, postdocs? How are you going to engage with undergraduates? You might get questions like, we have undergraduates that we're trying to pull in undergraduates from other majors. Might you teach a intro level course that will pull in more undergraduates into our majors? So think about yourself broadly in how your vision coalesces with the vision of the department. And also it's an opportunity to show how you take feedback. Somebody might ask a question like, wait a minute, your aim 1 for your first research grant seems like it could add this, or it could be a little bit, weak in this area or strong in that. How are you going to respond to that kind of feedback? Because ultimately you're going to be a colleague that's going to thrive in the mentorship environment of that department. And if you are going to thrive in that environment, how are they going to be able to mentor you to ensure that you can thrive? So it is an opportunity to demonstrate that. At Cornell, we have students and postdocs. We have a graduate student who serves on the search committee as a voting member of the search committee. And then we also have opportunities, lunches and individual meetings for students and postdocs to meet with the candidates. We have a student lunch, a graduate student lunch, and a postdoc lunch. And we're working towards really making those a space in which the candidates can really have an opportunity to talk with the students about what student life is like, and the students can ask specific questions to each of the candidates to get a feel of how they're going to be as a mentor and as a colleague within the university environment. And then also for the postdocs, it's often really important as to how they're going to be bringing in other postdocs and building that larger postdoctoral community. And then the input from the department, the search committee presents the candidates to the department. The search committee, after the interviews, gets together, hashes everything out, discusses the candidates, and then has a vote. Sometimes the vote is unanimous, sometimes it's not. There's a lot of discussion that goes on. Then there's a presentation to the faculty, and the faculty will decide whether or not they want to accept the recommendation of the search committee. Most of the time, once that decision that has taken place, and then it goes up to the dean is approving at that point. However, there usually is opportunity for each of the candidates to meet with somebody in the office of the dean during the interviews, and if anything comes up that's a red flag, that could also be considered. But at this point, the deans are hopefully going to be okay with whatever the faculty decide. So I'll stop there and let it just.
Yeah, thanks, Chelsea, for a very detailed description of the process. So we have many questions in the chat. I'll try to get to as many as possible, but if the panelists, if you are comfortable, you can just answer them on the chat as well. So I'll start with the first question. Mariam, she asks, what is the main thing that the search committee determines that the candidate is the best fit? Is it primarily decided on the recent research focus or overall career experience? For example, if someone is interested in plant development and the position is specifically for pollen development, how do you consider this? Do you want someone who has worked recently on pollen development, or do you see that there's overall experience in development that can be utilized to the specific position? So how does the search committee look at this?
I can try to answer that. So in our case, we included 2 assistant professors in our search committee, one from our own department who is not in the plant cell molecular biology area. We are organized in 3 major research areas. Pretty much diversity, ecology, evolution. There is another one that is more into population genetics, ecology, and then plant cell molecular biology. So our search was for a plant cell molecular biologist, but we included an assistant professor from another section because again, it's a colleague for the whole department. And so we wanted to have also their input. And then we invited an assistant professor in plant genetics from the genetics department, also to have another view and someone who can talk to the candidates about, things outside our own department. The rest of the faculty and the grad students were all connected to the area that we were searching in.
Maybe I can add a little bit more. So recently we have this plant reproductive biology position, and a good number of candidates had very strong experiences in plant reproductive biology, but some are not. But the important thing is the proposal or the research plan that they had, if it's very interesting and in cutting edge science in plant reproductive biology, I think that's very important. So it's good to have plant reproductive biology background, like paper publications, educations, but at least we can see future direction is very aligned with the direction of what we are thinking. This person didn't have to have a plant reproductive biology background to begin with, but we can at the same time see, oh, this person is just writing this proposal sake of because of this description is plant reproductive biology. So this person just tried to put something plant reproductive biology thing into the proposal, then we can kind of see it. But even so, if we can see a bright direction or a bright future in plant reproductive biology, then that's a very important aspect that we really appreciate, and we I think value a lot. So coming back to the point, the person doesn't have to have a strong background as long as we see a very good integration of the person's knowledge, accumulated knowledge, into future direction of plant reproductive biology. That's what we really wanted to see.
I guess I might just add that we would be very interested in seeing what the focus of somebody's research is. And if somebody were to say, I'm interested in all of plant development or all of plant biochemistry, we would probably judge that to be someone who's relatively unfocused and might not be very successful in getting research funds in the future. I think that so that's a slightly different take on that question rather than the fit with the search going on.
Okay. So I think then there are a few other questions asking what is the most important thing to stand out in an application? So is it the publications, or is it your research proposal, or is it reference letters? And if it's reference letters, then what are the important things that the search committee wants to see the mentors talk about the applicants?
I can start with this one. My first answer was just yes, it's all important. That's why we ask for those things, because they are really important. And but I will say, as we mentioned, we don't get the reference letters until later, oftentimes, right? Because there's a huge number of applicants, and you don't want all those reference letters. And a lot of that comes from just not wanting the fatigue of individuals having to write lots of reference letters for their students and postdocs. But the reference letters, that has a lot of opportunity to introduce bias. And so those are really used mostly just to verify what we already know through your other materials and to make sure there's nothing that we've missed. So I would say, the reference letters do definitely come later. But as far as like number of publications versus quality, where the publications are, I think your research statement should be very aspirational. Talk about what you know, where your foundation is, and then where you're going into the future. And your publication record should be sufficient so that we can see that trajectory. And that we can say yes. And it's not, oh, they got this paper and this journal. It's like, if the journal that's most impactful for you is a particular journal, and your papers are in there and they're showing a trajectory, that's great. It doesn't have to be Science or Nature. And also I will say something that I think has changed a lot in my own career is that we actually want to see co-authorship that demonstrates that you're part of a network and part of a community, because you're bringing that whole community with you. You're not coming as an isolated individual. You're bringing that with you, and that's part of the power of collaborative science in this day and age. So it's kind of your ability to show your story, what you contribute, but then also your real ability to kind of create a future in your research area, and how your research aspirations and your publication trajectory demonstrate that.
Connected to the letters, besides what, confirmation of, what we can read from your application, there is always this tricky part about how your project is different from your advisor's project, but at the same time is connected. And so that letter from your advisor is very important. First, to give the thumbs up that you are okay taking that project with you, that you most likely initiated in your advisor's lab, but also how it's going to be different, but there may be a collaboration, how things are going to be separated. So your advisor provides all that kind of background information on how this has been discussed and how you are going to grow from that lab into an independent project.
Yeah, I completely agree with Marisa. So we are cases where the committee members kind of questioned how different your proposed research will be compared to the postdoc lab or the PhD lab. So we assume that everything is going to be fine, but it's very important that it's stated in the letter, at least, so that we don't have to talk about it, because that type of conversation can impact in a negative manner. So it's very important that to make sure your research direction is maybe similar but different, and your PhD boss or postdoc boss will support your direction. It's very important.
Okay, thanks. So the next question is, can you share a successful application saying how the strategy helped them in excelling in the Zoom interview? So maybe based on one of the ads in a specific department, can you say, okay, we chose these people because of these things? I don't know if you can share that briefly.
Sorry, can I just ask about that question? It's how does somebody succeed in a Zoom interview?
Yeah, so this is specifically, how did someone strategize to be successful in a Zoom interview? Or maybe, or how were they successful in being called for a Zoom interview?
To be called.
How to be successful in being called? Well, I think it's all of the factors that we've previously discussed, where we may or may not have letters, and I think we've all agreed that, except for a few things, letters aren't particularly informative. We're going to be looking for people who have published often. I think this gets back to something that Chelsea said, that no, it's unlikely that as an assistant professor you're going to publish in Science or Nature, and so we want to see people who have published regularly, are familiar with that process, are going to be able to take their own work that they've done here at Purdue and get it published, get it through that process, because there's a limited time period for you to demonstrate your potential for success as an independent investigator. And I've seen many people waste a lot of time trying to get that first manuscript into Cell, and they just keep going down and down further, and it wastes a lot of time. We're going to look for clarity. Can you tell your story in a simple and impactful way? That's going to tell us how you're going to write a grant proposal. That's going to tell us how you're going to be in a classroom. Are you talking about how complicated your research is, or are you talking about how simple it is? Can you do that in an elegant way? Those are all of the sort of, I guess I might even call them intangibles that we're looking for in applications, and let somebody rise to the top and be invited for a Zoom interview. Other people probably have other things to say.
So, one case that I can share is there are candidates that had this gap years between publications, and then that was a question that we need to ask. So the postdoc having like 5 years, and then within 5 years they didn't have any papers, and it's recently starting publishing some papers, and then but this applicant didn't mention anything about why there was no publication in good 4 years. And then we kind of assumed that, yes, in order for this person to publish a good journal paper, maybe it took 4 years. But if it's not explained, then we need to question whether this person understands the situation where, once this person becomes an assistant professor, as Clint said, they need to have publications in a constant manner. So if you have this gap, that's okay. Just you need to explain why this happened, and you are aware of the problem, and then how you're going to tackle this problem when you become an assistant professor. So my suggestion is, don't assume that we understand everything. It's much better if you mention or explain to us, so that we don't have to ask these questions in a negative manner.
That's a really good point that Tomo made, and coming off of what Clint was saying, that it's your narrative, right? You are telling the story, and there might be an amazing reason why there's a 5-year gap, and please share that, right? Because that is what's going to make you unique. Whether it's because you overcame a struggle, or you had this amazing opportunity where you were doing field work, or whatever it is. Those are things that bring you as a person, because ultimately what becomes hard is when you start reading these materials, and the individuals that you're reading about are people, right? They no longer become applications, but they become a future colleague. Then it becomes a lot harder. That's when the job of the search committee becomes so intense and challenging, because you feel the loss of each individual as much as you feel the gain of the ultimately the one. And so you want to have yourself in that space where you feel like the committee is getting to know you just by even reading your materials. And then the Zoom interview, you should feel like you're taking that farther, that this is your chance to really be able to connect with people through that interview process. And I'll just say, we've just started, at least in the last search that I was on, and I hope they make this a little bit more universal across Cornell, but we've given candidates an opportunity to give a short presentation. There was a particular job, the job had particular things with it that it needed to do. So 5 minutes on your research, and then 5 minutes on how you're going to contribute to this broader initiative at Cornell. And so then it started off with that, a short presentation. And I think that for us was a really great way to see how the candidates were going to present their research and present their goals for being at Cornell. And so I think be prepared for some of that in the future, rather just being a question and answer, to have your sort of the elevator speech, right, ready to go as far as what your research is, your 1 minute, your 3 minute example of how you want to present yourself.
I would just add, again, there are so many aspects of all the applications, but at the end, a very exciting research area. And think about it. We may be hiring a colleague for the next 30 years, right? And so be sure that you have a long-term view of where you want to do the kind of leader that you want to become, why this research area is very important. And so we need to see that long-term vision, but also the next steps, right? So how I'm going to write my first grant proposal, this is what is going to go in my first proposal. So there may be questions either during the Zoom interview or in the in-person interview for sure, of exactly how you are planning the next steps in getting your own funding, right? And so combining that big picture to a very detailed next step plan is also very important for for the department to feel confident that they will be able to support you in being a successful colleague and scientist.
So there is a question specific for Marisa. So you mentioned that there was a discussion to set the vision of the department for the future hires. So can you share an example of the vision? So how broad do you think about the hiring vision, or how narrow do you set that, and how will that affect the future hires in the department or in the university?
Yeah, so because we have plant biologists spread all over campus, we had a discussion on where we want to be and what kind of research what kind of leaders we want to be within the plant biology area. And so certain specific areas of expertise that we have and certain areas of expertise that we would like to develop were discussed. And so as we were preparing that job ad and as we were going through the applications, we have that in mind, right? And so in the university, there is a big push for, and I guess that this is common for many other institutions, there is a new, very large data science center. There are grants coming for more AI based on guided biology for the future. And so we know this is going to be a great opportunity for plant biologists to collaborate with, to be part of. And so you need to bring on board people who can take advantage of that, right? So these were the kind of discussions and strategic planning. We want the new assistant professors to have the best chances of being successful as the campus is setting up their own aims for the next 10 years. So we try to align all that, not just our department, but the goals of the whole campus and the plant biology community on campus.
Anyone wants to add to that? How does the department choose the long-term vision, and how does that impact the hiring?
I can just quickly add that the long-term, it can be, different departments have different ways of doing that. So sometimes the long-term vision will be looking at where your excellence. I definitely agree with Marisa that things are constantly changing. We didn't know 10 years ago how much AI would be an influence now. And if we just had to go with a 10-year plan, then we'd be stuck with what we thought was important 10 years ago. And we're not going to do that. So these plans are fluid. They oftentimes, at Cornell, part of what we do is agricultural. We have certain collections, certain germplasm, and certain needs with extension that need to be filled. So if we know somebody is hiring and they work in soybean genetics, like we're going to need to have that continued because we've got this germplasm collection that needs to go on, or grapes. We don't do soybeans as much, but grapes and other things. So fruit crops, whatever. So there might be something specific like that. But then there's also going to be space to know that we need somebody who's going to integrate across these particular disciplines, and then we're going to define it as we get closer to it. So it might be going into a particular area, but it might be, we might say, okay, we need a systems biologist, but we're going to really more closely define that as we get to the point of being able to apply, to propose a position. I will say that we put in proposals to our dean in April, and we find out later on that year whether or not they got moved forward. And we're a very large school, so we'll put in maybe 7 things that we're proposing, and the dean will choose, if we're lucky, 3 that we get to search for. And so it's a yearly thing where we're kind of saying, well, we really need this area. We desperately need it. And the dean's like, yeah, I don't have money for that this year, so that's not going to happen. So we need to be super aspirational in what we're putting forward and say, this is an area that's incredibly exciting. There's a lot of postdocs out there that are doing this work. We know we're going to get someone awesome. And that is part of that application ad. So we're sort of tracking what all you guys are doing and figuring out which of these skills we really want to bring into our environment. So the more you're, in a sense, you guys are, the success that you're having is influencing what we're looking for in our new faculty hires.
Thank you. That's really good to hear for the postdocs. I think we'll have time for maybe one last question. And because a lot of the people who registered for this webinar, they are either planning to apply this year or maybe next year. So they are not everyone is ready for the academic job season. So the question is, if you have any advice to people who are either just starting out or maybe a year or 2 out from applying, so what are the things that you think they should focus on so that they become more successful in their application package?
Well, one suggestion that I can give is the get to know people, because the in-person communication is very strong. And then by knowing people, it really affects in a positive manner. So just, if you, because only 3 or 5 people can be selected for in-person interview, and you might not be able to show all these talents and in future bright direction, the Zoom or just application. So if you have a chance, just go to conferences and visit university and then just, talk to people who might be in a search committee in the future.
I guess I would say, make sure you have those conversations with your advisor, and you have a very clear understanding of what you can be, where you want to go in the future, and make sure that you're not going to be overlapping or competing with your advisor. Marissa mentioned that was very important in the letters. So we want to see that featured in that letter, and we want that there to be that clear understanding. And I guess I would also say, take every opportunity you can to practice your research talks and chalk talks. If you can organize something within your department where you can get feedback on your ideas and your directions, and try not to be polite Midwesterners, like really really go at it, really challenge one another, to make sure that you can that you can succeed in that interview situation where you're going to be nervous and it's going to be tense because you've got a lot on the line. So having some experience in that area would be very helpful in that process.
I would also add, if you have any opportunity to write even a small proposal, but show that you have those skills, that you are developing those skills, that you are familiar with the funding system in the US, where are you going to be asking from money? Can you show that you know how it's done, right?
Yeah, I think I'll ask one other related question, because a lot of the participants here are international postdocs, and they have very few opportunities to get funding from United States when they're a postdoc. So they cannot apply for NSF postdoc or USDA postdoc fellowships. So how does the search committee look at their application? Because they may not have had the opportunities to apply for these funding, as opposed to a domestic candidate who might have had the opportunity. So just thinking about the differences in opportunities.
We are aware of that, but at the same time, again, not everything is NSF or NIH. There may be some opportunities within your own institutions or foundations. Just show that you are aware that, fundraising is a big part of being a professor, and that, you know what entails. And if you cannot officially write a grant, that when we were talking about the letters, maybe your advisor should comment on how involved you were in writing those grant proposals from the lab? Have you helped? Be involved, be aware of what it takes, because that will become very evident when you talk to the search committee, to your future colleagues, that you know exactly what the next steps are, and you know what it takes and how to write a proposal and all the little pieces that have to come together. So try to provide as much evidence of that type of skills, that you are working on those skills, although you have been successful in getting a grant is even better. But we all understand that not everyone has the same eligibility for opportunities in the US.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, most people are part of societies as graduate students and as postdocs that have small grants, and demonstration that you've consistently applied for those small grants means a lot, because it means that you're eager, you're constantly looking for ways in which you can further your work. If it's been like an opportunity to go visit another lab, or to if you have some sort of building your impact, whether it's of your research or broader impacts, that just demonstrating that you're kind of contributing to that larger community. And we haven't talked a lot about your contributions to diversity statements or different areas of that, but that is really an opportunity for you to tell your story and to demonstrate that part of you're bringing your whole self to this institution and to the job. And I think this is something that is really important, that we want the candidates to feel that that this is a place where they can thrive, and that they'll be part of that broader community.
Should we include failed applications for grants that weren't funded?
Would this be in like a CV, like in your CV?
That's where I'm thinking, yeah.
I would say it depends how things went. Sometimes you didn't get it, but you were pre-selected, or you got some kind of honor mention. If there is anything to show that you were close, or you got very good feedback, or if it didn't go that well, maybe it's not, it doesn't prove that you know how to do it. So I don't think that it will hurt, but I don't think that it will help either.
I'll say when you're going up for tenure, definitely, because then that's showing that you've been working hard in these areas. But yeah, I agree with Marissa. I mean, maybe one of the things, if you can spin it so that these are areas where you already have a proposal in place and you're going to be resubmitting, then yeah, right? Because that shows that you're already there. And so yeah, it made it through the round, it made it through the preliminary round, but didn't get funded. I'm resubmitting next January. Absolutely.
Many people will say we got very good comments from the panel. They have very useful suggestions. So we are ready to, so spin it in a positive way.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up this webinar. It was very informational for everyone. And thank you so much for the panelists. Once again, let's give a big round of applause to all the panelists. And thanks again for taking the time to also answer questions in the chat. Yeah, thank you so much.